Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, great. Yes, it's great to be here. I know we have just a short period of time. Today, we're going to talk about a collaboration between Butler Library here at Buffalo State University and with a couple of faculty members in the social and psychological foundations of education. Of course, this whole story kind of started when we found out about the SUNY OER impact grants. My name is Chris Hulsman. I'm the Electronic and Educational Resources Librarian. I'm going to hand it off to my colleagues one at a time to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Gehan Senthinathan from Social Psychological Foundations of Ed and the Department of Psychology.
Hi, I'm Reva Fish, also from the Social and Psychological Foundations of Education Department.
Little background information on Buffalo State University. We're somewhere between 5,500 to 6,000 on our FTE, which is about 7,500 total students. And as you can see, as far as FTE is concerned, the vast majority of our students are in undergraduate programs. We do have a high percentage of Pell eligible students and financial aid eligible students, as we are really the only urban centered campus in all of SUNY. And one of the reasons why I brought up the retention number is that we do struggle with holding on to students, which makes OER and access to textbook so much more important. One of the things that we've organized and worked on over the last 4 years is a initiative that we refer to as usually the Alternative Learning Materials Initiative. It used to be called Affordable, but we can kind of use both of those interchangeably. This is a collaboration between the library and our Instructional Design and Distance Learning Department, along with our Teaching and Learning Center, which we're very active in doing presentations and workshops for OER. So for our campus, we have had some really good steps forward in terms of getting faculty engaged in OER and creation of OER. One of the things that we do struggle with is trying to get feedback from our faculty. And I just want to show a little bit, a few graphics from a survey that we did with faculty that unfortunately didn't get a great response. But we, just like many universities and colleges across the country, see a lot of the same trends with traditional textbooks. For example, you can see our responses are the exact same as across the country as far as the percentage of faculty that skip textbooks, that teach it in a different order or replace content with their own material. So this is something that we use an awful lot to get faculty thinking about maybe creating a new learning material, something that of course would be affordable, but maybe something that the students would interact with better than they did with a traditional textbook. We do have some pretty decent survey results from faculty that typically that use OER, and you can see that both on the as far as what faculty feel is how successful OER and public domain materials are as opposed to traditional textbooks, very supportive. And also we have faculty on campus that are very supportive of creating some kind of scholarship piece in the tenure promotion process for faculty that are highly engaged in it. The one thing that we do struggle with, however, is that there's a lot of faculty that are either undecided or disagree about sharing their OER content, which kind of in a sense makes it not OER, but they do not really typically want to be engaged in doing presentations like this, even though the vast majority of our faculty that use OER discuss that there's a high efficacy of it and that it has helped their students learn easier. And just to give you a little more background on our faculty, most of our faculty that are putting together OER content, they're using open access articles, OER material, and public domain. So these are things that can be shared with other courses and other faculty on campus. And we do right now have the zero textbook cost attribute in Banner, which allows students to choose courses that are reported as zero textbook. We only keep account of OER, and you can see we are getting slightly better results from our surveys. And after 2 years of taking this data, you can see if we use our SUNY metrics here, which is an average of 25 students per course with an average of $107 average or cost of course learning materials. If we apply that to 98 CRNs here, that's about 2,500 enrollments and a total savings of over $250 $1,000 that is saved by students over the course of 2 years. So the impact of this is actually really huge. And that brings us to our SUNY impact grants that the call for proposals went out in April of 2023. The final grant total was 19 that was awarded out of 54 proposals, which is close to about $300,000 awarded, and an estimated savings of 1.3 million. In order for us to create an OER here, we had to, as many of you know, we had to talk faculty into creating openly licensed materials that's licensed in Creative Commons Attribution CC BY. So what we did is we met a few times and discussed the potential, and Dr. Fish and Dr. Senthinathan had discussed their interest in creating an OER textbook to replace the current textbook that they're using, which is from 2013. I think there's an updated version that came out pretty recently called EdPsych Modules. And this would be used in 3 sections of courses, the SPF 302, 303, and 503. So it would be not only used in undergraduate, but graduate courses. And the cost being $138.29. That would give us a projected savings when we get this instituted into courses of $30,000 in a year. We are still working on trying to get our course sections reported in Cirrus little by little. What we were hoping to do was pilot a chapter in the summer session, but we're hoping to do that. I'm going to show you the timeline in a minute within the next semester or 2. So our timeline was once we got the grant accepted, which was in summer of 23, we began drafting the OER, or actually Dr. Fish and Dr. Senthinathan began drafting OER in a Microsoft Word document. In the meantime, I created a Pressbook shell and decided that I would be responsible for migrating the information into that shell, which we weren't really sure as to how difficult and arduous that would be. As it turns out, it's really not that difficult at all with the way Pressbooks works. In spring of 24, we began to migrate an introduction and a chapter, and we continue to migrate chapters in throughout this fall semester as the book is being written. And the final publishing of the OER and implementation should begin in spring of 2025 or next semester. So the OER creation, I am not an educational psychologist. I always talk, when I talk to faculty, I always say that the faculty, you are the content experts, but what I can do is help create the actual shell of the book and migrate the information in. For those of you who might not know, we can use access to Pressbooks through SUNY Create for free. That will host the book and the back end of it as well. And Pressbooks organizes the books in sections that are typically referred to as chapters and parts. So your major chapters can have smaller sub-chapters or parts underneath it. And each of the areas that you will have in your table of contents will link into each of these areas of Pressbooks. Some of the nice tools that it has available is it does have a way of using, doing citations using footnotes. This kind of created a little bit of a challenge because we wanted to stay pretty true to APA. It also has a glossary, and it allows users to download in a number of different formats. And they also have text boxes that has been really nice to kind of dress it up with some just different colors. And what we do is keep a consistency file to make sure that the different content that's going into those text boxes, as you'll see in a moment, is always going to be in that same type of formatting. One thing that we do have to pay attention to is accessibility. Of course, as always, you can see here on the left, there are tables and visuals that are going to be converted from Microsoft Word that we have to build out right in Pressbooks. But we have found that this has actually been a pretty, I don't want to say easy process, but it has been actually not an awful one. It's gone quicker than we thought. And it's actually been kind of enjoyable to make sure that we're building out content in accessible formats. Some of the actual images that we have, we make sure that there's either really good alt text or that we are putting in the caption all of the content that is in those visuals as well. And one of the nice things about Pressbooks is that when you are editing and you finish editing and saving a page, there'll be a little check mark if their accessibility checker says that everything on the page is accessible. Of course, you're going to have to go back and double check that as well. I do actually want to talk now, or at least give my colleagues, Dr. Fish and Dr. Senthinathan, just to some of their, get some of their feedback about what it's been like to collaborate with the library, write an OER, and go through this process.
The collaboration has been excellent. Chris has taken on a lot of the administrative tasks for us and the task of putting together the book from the content that we write, which has allowed us to spend the time writing, because we're enthusiastic about this project, but actually doing the writing takes a lot longer than we had initially expected. We want to make sure we get the right voice for our population of students and the content that we want to include. One of our main reasons for doing this was that the textbook we were using was designed in a way, formatted in a way that didn't allow us to get to as much content as we wanted each semester. So now we've been able to do that.
Yeah, excuse me, I'll agree completely. The collaboration has been smooth and supportive. I think the amount of support that you get from the library has been really helpful for us. And so Chris has really supported us throughout the creation of the content. I think mapping it out was the first hurdle. Once you have that plan, it is hard to stick to it because you'll run into all sorts of challenges along the way. And so I think the writing process is slower than we had initially thought, but it is allowing us to create something that's really meaningful and I think will be helpful for us and our students in the future.
That's been extremely rewarding.
Absolutely.
We're going to walk you through just what we have so far of the published textbook, and then we really would love questions just from the from anybody that would like to hear faculty perspective as opposed to librarian perspective and kind of me who doesn't know anything about educational psychology. But I am going to share my screen one more time here and open up our current book here. This link is live. I can actually put it in the chat in just a moment. What we're hoping to do is kind of do a dry run with just the contents that we have available. As you can see, we only have chapters 1 and chapter 5 available right now. We are building out content with the other 3 chapters that are going to be involved in this book. You can see that there's plenty of space to put book information as far as the authors, our licensing, what subject categories that we're in. And then just even further metadata down here. I put myself in as a contributor, mostly just because I'm migrating the information, but I'm not creating the information. So students will be able to interact with the book this way. They can also download the book into a digital or a print PDF. Of course, some students like having print formats. And then as I scroll down, we can jump into a couple of the areas of the book so far. We made sure to put author biographies because we wanted to make sure that our academic experts here are getting their due credit. And then when the students can actually just go right into the next section with these arrows here. What you're seeing underneath in this case study, this is the text box that we referred to earlier. We try to keep the colors of all these consistent using a file to make sure that each of the case studies that are moved into them are going to be under the same or in the same looking text box. Same thing with these think about it, which are at the end of the chapters, kind of just like interactive questioning that students, you can make it either an assignment. We are hoping that maybe we can create and embed interactive components of this in the future. And then as I continue to scroll down, you can see we've used some of our actual pictures from our marketing and communications of our faculty here, mostly because marketing and communications gave us the permission to use them, so we don't have to worry about copyright. Here is an example of some of the glossary. So if I click on any of these highlighted words, the glossary definition will pop right out. Students can look at the glossary as a whole. Same thing here with reference list. And then as for any of the areas that have a citation, you can put in the APA citation here at the end. This can actually bring you back to where the citation was originally put in. So we have a lot of content so far for 2 chapters. The export for PDF is, I think, over 90 pages, which we kind of thought was a lot more than what we had already had. And at this point, I am kind of hoping that we could get into a conversation, maybe share some of our experiences of collaborating with faculty who are prepared and willing to, and in this case with Dr. Fish and Dr. Senthinathan, who are really excited to create an OER textbook and excited to make it available to students through the CC BY copyright license. Of the chat. We do have a question in the chat. Knowing what you know about this now, what would you have done differently to make the process smoother and more effective if you were starting a new OER project today? Would you like to take that?
Sure. I think the real mental adjustment was like the amount of time that you would need to allot to this. I think in some ways we thought we would have the bulk of the writing done by the summer, and I think the truth of the matter is when you start to write something, that the amount of backwards motion, like you'll write a paragraph, you'll write a page, you'll write a chapter, and then you'll question whether that fits. Does it belong here? So I wouldn't change anything in the process except for the expectation of timelines. I think that we were hoping for something, and I think over time we realized in order to create a good product or one that we're satisfied with, that things would take much longer than we had hoped in the beginning. But in the end, still a rewarding process. I would suggest to anyone to take on the endeavor. I just think that there are hurdles, and it's so much of it is individual. Like we split up once we figured out what I should work on and what Dr. Fish should work on. We split up things based on our content knowledge, and then we started working on them, and we both had the same experience. It was like I wrote something a month ago, and I look back and I'm like, I don't know if this is the way we should be spinning it, and so much of it is just like creating a coherent narrative for the students. So there is that that we've learned, I think, over time. But I wouldn't change anything except for the understanding of how long it might take.
I agree. We found the most effective thing to do was at least try to get into what we're working on every few days, because if you let it go when other things are taking over your time, it's very hard to remember where you were in the writing. And also we try to touch base at least every few weeks about what we're doing, where we are, coming up with new ideas to help each other. So all that communications really help. And we just got lucky that the three of us collaborate really well. Everybody liked the approach we were using and was comfortable with what we were doing.
Are there any other questions? Do you want me to just unmute or put it in the chat? Be interested to know if any of you are currently working on a OER project with faculty. How did you select Pressbooks, and would you recommend it? Well, I think most of the reason why we selected it initially was because we had access to it through SUNY, through SUNY Create. And I had not used Pressbooks, but I had used WordPress, and Pressbooks is basically built out of that same code. And it was basically trial and error. We did write a little bit of extra money into the grant in case we needed to switch up to a different software. But of course, the problem with that is that you probably would have to be paying hosting for a long time to make it available. As far as would we recommend it? I'd say absolutely. It turned out to be a lot easier than I thought. There's a few kind of the things that make it really simple. And being able to like copy and paste it is that it really takes care of formatting really well for you. You kind of select the format for the entire book itself. And when you're pasting plain text into it, it formats that right into it. So you're not having to worry about finding different size fonts or different types of fonts in there. It kind of just migrates the information in just this very plain way. And then you can add the rest of the bells and whistles like the text boxes. And the way it organizes the the content into the chapters and parts that make it linkable, and it gives you the option to make each of those parts linkable, I think is really going to be helpful for students to go through the book. So I would say, yes, I would recommend it. I don't know how you like the way it looks on the outside of it.
I think it's been flexible enough.
I think I was amazed at how much it looked like a textbook.
Yeah,
When you finished, yeah.
And actually, I will just pop that link in.
So thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone else has any questions, please just unmute yourself or type into the chat.
I put the link to our book in there. You can see it's a really nice URL too. It's a very simple URL that we're given there. Were you able to receive course releases to write the book?
Would have been wonderful.
We didn't ask and it wasn't offered.
I'm
We're
not sure that-
getting minimal compensation for this. I think it's more of a academic pursuit and interest in having the best book possible for our students.
And I think an act of service in some ways is how you might look at it. A course release would have certainly helped to speed up the process, but no.
Yeah.
In many ways, I think one of the questions is, where does this fit? Is it scholarship? Is it service? Is it creative works? I think in most traditional departments, it's hard to define it as scholarship unless it becomes accepted in some way like that. But it is certainly creative activity, and it's definitely service. And so it certainly ticks some of the boxes in our agendas in one way or another.
Do you anticipate your students wanting print copies, or will most be content with an ebook? I don't know, you know your students.
I think with the PDF format, students are able to read the book easily. I know with the book we're currently using, some students have trouble with the ebook because it doesn't just scroll easily and they have trouble finding the section that they need. But I think with the PDF, I think a lot of them are going to go for that.
And just as an aside, the digital PDF, when you download it, does include the hyperlinks that will take you to the different areas of the book from the table of contents. So it is kind of like an active, it's not just a static PDF where you have to scroll through a number of pages. You can kind of skip around the book based on where we want the hyperlinks and anchors to be.
I find that in every group of 30 or 40 students, there are some that are just going to want the physical printed out version, but as long as it's an option for them, I think we're okay.
Thank you. Yeah, glad we're not really sure how many people have gone down the Pressbooks path of it, and we've certainly enjoyed it so far. So I'll be interested if you have any questions. You feel free to reach out to me, and I can definitely get any of those questions to Dr. Fish and Dr. Senthinathan. I think we have like a minute or two left, so if there are any final questions. I can put my email in the chat. So I just put my email in the chat. So feel free to reach out if you have any further questions or just want to know more about our experiences. And thank you very much for this opportunity.